Cause I'll never die. Not lies, can't slice, and using every one of them and running wild. But I'm back. Yes, I'm back. Yes, I'm back, babe. Yes, I'm back. Yes, I'm
Brian Johnson's performance on Back in Black is the performance of a lifetime. I don't think anyone would dispute the fact that Brian never sang better than on that album.
Brian Johnson does the greatest vocal performances of his career, bar none. This was his triumph. He sings brilliantly, absolutely amazingly.
What are the reasons for that? Well, Mutt Lange was an incredible producer. He certainly brought the best out of him. And the songs are so strong, melodically they're really strong, and that probably helped Brian to a point.
It combines the raw ferocity of Power Age with a very polished sort of production sound that obviously was a much more appealing to the American audience. And within that, Brian sits very comfortably with the rest of the group. He doesn't sound out of place at all. And a lot of that's down to his voice. Because of the tone of the album, that it was, you know, it was a band in mourning, it was a tribute to Bon Scott as such. There's quite an ominous feel to a lot of the music that's on there. And I think that his sort of high-powered, screeching vocals fit that quite well. It adds a sort of razor's edge to the sound of the music.
Mutt Lange will coach a great vocal performance out of you as well. Plus the fact that Brian was no spring chicken when he joined the band, and the older you get, how long can you keep on screeching for? Angus said that Brian sounds like somebody dropped a truck on his foot. So if your own band are saying that about you, which is, you know, perfectly good description of him.
When you hear Brian Johnson doing stuff like Hell's Bells and Back in Black, you know, it's unmistakably him, and listen to it now, you can't actually imagine Bon Scott singing those songs. I mean, it may have been his songs in the first place, we'll never know.
I don't know how Bon would have approached those songs. Who knows how he would have slightly changed them. That's something we'll never know. Maybe in another lifetime, in another dimension, another timeline, Bon Scott did that album. We're with the Brian Johnson album, and he does a fantastic job. It's his album. Every track on Back in Black is a classic. Every track is a killer. Every track has its own sense of perspective, a sense of belonging, and even the way they actually tracked it, the way they ordered the songs, works superbly. One of the great moments for me is Hell's Bells, though. The opening with the tolling of the bell and the mournful guitar coming in.
Hell's Bells had already been written and recorded before the bell was introduced, the sound of the tolling bell. And they felt they needed something. They knew that it was going to be the album opener. They felt they had this a riff that Angus once described as ominous, and it was a very weird sound for AC/DC, quite sort of moody and mysterious. So they decided they were going to have a tolling bell at the start of this song, obviously. So the first thing they did was they went to somewhere in Leicestershire and tried to record the sound of a bell in a church, one of the finest examples of a bell in a clock tower of a church in England. The only problem was that the bell tower was full of pigeons. Every time they struck the bell, the pigeons flew off, and it was like, so the fluttering wings meant that they couldn't, that was being recorded as well. And then by the time the bell had stopped ringing and they were ready to record it again, of course the pigeons had all landed again, so this is an interminable process of trying to, pigeons holding up the making of the record. So in the end what they did was they enlisted a bell maker to actually make them a bell that they could strike, and the bell maker struck the bell in the studio to record it properly. That was the very bell that Brian Johnson ended up, you know, hitting on stage and then jumping around on stage and all of that. And of course, you've got yourself a wonderful set piece then.
I've always had this theory that it's almost Highway to Hell Part 2. Now in Highway to Hell, of course, the title track of the last album with Bon Scott sings about basically going down to hell, or being on the highway to hell. Now if you look at the lyrics for Hell's Bells, it's talking about rolling thunder, pouring rain, coming on like a hurricane, Satan's calling to you. I think in a way this is AC/DC's way of paying tribute to Bon Scott by taking Highway to Hell another step and almost basically saying the guy who was rolling thunder and pouring rain was Bon. He came on like a hurricane. And Satan did call to him, Satan in the wider sense of the term, from beyond the grave, as it were. He was taken from all of us, from AC/DC fans, from the band, etc., into a different world. And I think, in a way, that was their tribute to Bon. And what a great way to open the album. Not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't that driving, dirty blues rock riff that AC/DC were always known for, and in fact is on that record elsewhere. It's very slow, it builds steadily. And to me, that is the standout track on a great record. If I had to pick one song, that would be it. But every one of them is just a masterpiece.
There's an expression used by Sum 41, these has-been pop punks, and they called their album All Killer No Filler, which is a bit of a misnomer on their behalf. But I would venture to say that that is 10 tracks without, there's not one bad track on Back in Black.
You know what they say about Back in Black? All killer, no filler.
It's all killer, no filler.
As they used to say in Kerrang magazine at the time. But the thing is, I think, for me personally, the standout tracks are the title track, Hell's Bells, and I think the great hit single, which was You Shook Me All Night Long. So I think it's a great pop song.
I use the word pop with a small p. You've got pop metal hits like You Shook Me All Night Long and Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, which were, you know, the highest charting singles for the band had at that point. You've got like timeless classics like Back in Black and Hell's Bells on there. And then even the songs that people might say, well, you know, sort of gloss over, What Do You Do for Money, Honey, Let Me Put My Love Into You, Shake a Leg, Give the Dog a Bone, you know, Have a Drink on Me. These are all, you know, some bands would kill to be able to write songs like that, and they're not filler, they're up there. It's just a consistent run of really, really good songs from start to finish.
It's really difficult to pick out the highlights of Back in Black because I can't actually think of one weak track on the album.
Every song on that record is a masterpiece. Every song has its own personality. Put them together and they could have easily clashed, and people may have said, oh, well, I want to hear tracks 1, 2 and 3, skip the rest. But they work in tandem, they work as a uniform, and they work as a unison, and they work individually. And that's the beauty of Back in Black. Individually brilliant, collectively even greater.